boom, boom, boom. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Wrestle Recap. My name is Michelle Tate.
My name is Justin Tate.
And we are the brother-sister duo that takes you on the journey through the wrestling decades.
Yes, that's right. We have a great time doing it, Michelle. Let's tell the viewers what we did last night.
Let's do. We went to a local indie show, and it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. Old School Wrestling, OSW, who's actually been around in the West Texas area for quite some time. They put on another show last night. And Michelle, who was the special guest in the main event?
It was Matt Riddle, which I was really surprised. I mean, I know they've had like Billy Gunn like years ago, but when they announced Matt Riddle, I remember I screenshotted it and I was like, oh, we're going.
Yeah.
And he did a good job.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it's so funny when we go to these indie shows where there is a big star, because I went to that one where they brought in Billy Gunn. That was like 10 years ago. They also brought in Mickie James.
Oh, cool.
And there's no hiding them until the main event. They're out there before the show signing autographs at their merch booth and taking pictures with fans. It was a really great show. It was a lot of fun.
There was no air conditioning.
Zero.
That was a little rough, but it was a little warm in there. And we did get Vert Vixen randomly showing up. And that was weird because it's not like she was a booked guest on the show. It was almost like she came with someone on the show and they were like, oh no, we need another wrestler. Get up here in your t-shirt and leggings and do a match.
Yeah, it was a little bit odd because you see Vert Vixen on TV and she's got all this cool makeup and this cool look and everything. And she looked like she just came from the gym. But she was actually in an intergender match and did a great job.
She did. So yeah, we were lucky. I mean, she wasn't announced. So you were really excited and you told me who it was. And I was like, I don't recognize her. Then when I Googled her, I was like, oh, Vert Vixen. Yeah. Gotcha. All right, Justin, before we jump in that time machine, let's talk about the current news of the week.
Let's do it. What happened this week?
Well, I know Rhea made her big return. I mean, she had returned, 2 weeks ago, but she wanted to talk about it this time. And she was not happy, Justin. She wasn't happy about Dom, the whole Judgment Day, how they've been running things. The woman steps away and the boys start to play.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I think her versus Liv at SummerSlam, I think it is official now. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. Do you think Liv hangs on to her title, or do you think Rhea takes it back?
I really don't know. If you would have asked me this like a month ago, I would have said, oh yeah, Rhea totally gets her title back. But I would think she gets it back. But who knows? Shenanigans might happen. It might be more interesting if Liv keeps it. What do you think?
Well, there's still this whole interaction with the Judgment Day, and Liv seems like the title was not her only goal, like Dom was not her only goal. Maybe Dom was just her step up into something else, maybe taking over the Judgment Day. Who knows? But I think there's more gas in the tank on this one.
Oh, definitely. It doesn't even matter who wins. It's going to be, that story's going to continue. So
yeah,
I'm just flying.
Definitely. What else we got that happened this week?
Sonya Deville came back and had her first match in a while. That was fun. She won. It was a tag match. I think her partner was Selena Vega, right? Maybe I made that up. You told me that you didn't get to watch Raw this week, and so now I'm like, what happened? But there is an internet rumor, Justin, that I just saw that it will be Drew McIntyre and CM Punk at SummerSlam with Seth Rollins as the ref. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I don't know if there's any truth to that. I could see where it could be fun to have Seth as a referee for that match because he's got beef with both of those guys.
I was about to say, yeah.
So that could be fun. I'm a big Seth Rollins fan. He's one of my favorites out there right now, and so I'll always prefer to see him in a match. But this is one of those times where if they say he's the ref for this, for the sake of the story, I'm kind of okay with that if it happens.
Yeah, if it happens, that's the catcher right there. Out of AEW, we just got to talk about that Ospreay versus MJF hour-long match. Wow, that was incredible. I saw some internet trolls saying there was no story, but the story had been being set up. Like since MJF got back, he's been setting up that match, and we all just assumed it was happening at Wembley. So my question is, do you think they're going to rematch at Wembley? Because MJF did win his title.
He did. And it's kind of, anymore, you never know if the champion has a rematch clause or not. It seems like it goes away and then they forget about it until it's convenient to have it again. So who knows? But I don't think anybody would be complaining if they ran that one back at All In, especially right there at Wembley. The other thing that people are still talking about is the idea of Swerve versus Ospreay at some point. But you do have Bryan Danielson, who has now won the right to challenge for the championship. So a lot of ways this could go.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then, of course, Nick Nemeth, a.k.a. Dolph Ziggler, back in the WWE days, he won the TNA World Championship last night. Good for him.
Yeah, right there at their pay-per-view. Look at that. Good job on Nikki, as he was known in his Spirit Squad days.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, Justin, you ready to jump into the time machine?
Let me think. Do I have my water? I have my phone, which will be a futuristic device when we go back to 1984. So let's do it.
We're here, bro. There
Oh.
it went.
Oh,
we are already here.
It's weird. I didn't know if my house was still here in 1984, but we're here.
I think yours was. Mine wasn't, but
No. Yeah,
yours is so classy and neat. Mine's just one of those, I don't know, looks like every other house built in 2010. But anyway.
Little cookie cutter of houses. Bang, bang,
little
bang.
bit.
Yeah. Except yours kind of looks like a morgue / haunted house.
Yeah.
On the inside.
I'm not going to lie, though. Anytime like our AC went out this week, oh, that was awful. But every time we have like a service person come over, they always really appreciate my wrestling decor and my horror movie decor. And it always strikes up a conversation. So,
yeah, of course. Yeah. So here we are, 1984, NWA Starrcade. And if you'll remember last week, we covered Starrcade 1983. So it's now been 1 year since the episode that we covered last week. This was November 22nd, 1984. And again, just like last year, is from the Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina. Around 16,000 fans packed in there with commentators Gordon Soley and Bob Caudle, just like last week. Classic voices in wrestling. Michelle, you know that I'm a former radio DJ, and I played a lot of 80s music on the radio. So what was the number one song in the U.S. on this day in 1984, November 22nd?
Well, Justin, it was, if I could start the sound cue.
Wake me up before you go. Don't leave me hanging on.
It was Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham. And I know you have some strong feelings about Wham, especially around Christmas time.
Oh my God. Okay.
That's why I started laughing.
I love Christmas music. I listen to it starting October 1st. Okay. But if you play Last Christmas by Wham around me, I will. I know I'm already bald. I'll start losing the other hairs on my head, the armpits, the legs, it all goes away. I hate that song so much, almost as much as I hate Christmas Shoes.
Oh, yeah. I liked Christmas shoes when I was younger, and now I'm just like, this is stupid. No,
that
she doesn't
kid
need
should have
shoes.
kept the receipt.
Oh. Well, what day of the year was it? Speaking of Christmas.
What?
Speaking of Christmas, I mean, kind of. What day of the year did this happen, Justin?
This was just like last year. This was Thanksgiving. And like we talked about last week, the big thing back then was to run your big shows on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, because the family's already together and you'll all go to the wrestling show. So that's where we were at this time in 1984. Now, just a little bit of background. Just like last week, Starrcade 83, Starrcade 84, this was slightly before in-home pay-per-view, like we've talked about. So this event was actually broadcast in theaters all around the South. And there are actually several wrestlers who were scheduled to appear on this show, but they had left the company by the time that Starrcade 84 rolled around because they had already left for the WWF. Vince McMahon had started gobbling up all the talent he could from the territories, and so they kind of had to scramble a little bit.
Apparently, and that's pretty last minute.
Yeah, and that's why this show feels a little bit clustered, a little bit off base, I think, and we'll talk about that as we go through. And it feels just kind of off because of talent suddenly disappearing and going and signing with the WWF. And the guy in the main event tonight is the current booker of the company at this time. Dusty Rhodes was the one calling all the shots around there.
Well, good, because I feel like they needed him to be doing that. And especially, with all of the clusteriness, I think he probably did what he could. But yeah, we'll talk about it later. It definitely feels a little off. But Justin, do you have any of the...
You serious, Clark?
Oh, wrong sound cue. I suck.
Wrestle stats.
Wrestle stats. There we go.
There it is. Okay. There we go. Yes. We do have now, we're going to talk about how many wrestlers on the show are still alive today. We keep a running tally. The wrestlers on this show, there are 26 of them. 12 of them are still with us today. So about 46% of it. Not bad for a show 40 years ago. If you combine all the NWA pay-per-views that we've seen so far, which is Starrcade 83 and this one, 23 out of 44 are still alive. So a little over half, which is really, really good. But unfortunately, we always have to talk about the final appearances. This is the final time that we will see any pay-per-view from any company featuring the following wrestlers. Assassin number 1,
Rikishi.
Brian Adidas, or in this show, Adidas, we'll get to that. Buzz Tyler, Denny Brown, Elijah Akeem, Jesse Barr, Kareem Muhammad, Mike Davis, and Mr. Ito. And
so everybody?
Yeah, right. Yeah, pretty much. It was a lot of them. Let's see. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 9 wrestlers who we will see on this show who we'll never see on another pay-per-view again. So let's go to the first. Let's kick this pay-per-view off. What do you say?
Justin, let's go to this first singles match. It was Denny Brown versus Mike Davis. Now, this is probably one of the weirdest matches I have ever seen in my wrestling fandom.
I was so confused. I was so confused.
I was so confused, and I texted you because you're like the fountain of wrestling knowledge. And I was like, Justin will be able to explain this to me. And when you were like, I have no idea. I'm so confused. I get it. So let's get into it a little bit. We've got Denny Brown. He was born in 1956, and he's still alive and hopping at the ripe old age of 68. He debuted in 1979, but he had his last match in 1997 on WCW Saturday Night in Dalton, Georgia.
Oh, I miss WCW Saturday Night. I feel like AEW Collision is trying to like pick up those vibes, but Saturday Night. So
they're getting better.
Yeah.
Collision used to be kind of but it's getting some storyline to it. He also won the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship a few times, but he was usually kind of booked as a jobber to lose to the bigger stars. As for Mike Davis, he was born in 1956 as well, but unfortunately he passed away at the age of 45 in 2001. He debuted around the same time, 1977, and his last match was just a random indie show in Dallas in 2000. So yeah, just a year before he died at 44.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was best known as part of the tag team, the Rock and Roll RPMs with Tommy Lane. Yeah. And he went on to work as a jobber for both WWF and WCW, followed by a run on the indies until his early death, unfortunately. Now, the reason why this match is just weird all around, Justin. The only good part. Okay, so the only good part is the ref. He had a proper outfit this time. He had the black and white, but he was wearing a brown belt, Justin, with black shoes, black pants, and a black and white shirt.
No.
He does not have a wife because a wife would not have let him leave that house. But
fellas, there are a few fashion rules out there that are just so easy to remember. If you're wearing black, don't wear brown shoes or a brown belt. If you're wearing jeans, don't tuck a shirt into it. Doesn't matter what kind of shirt it is. And if you do feel the need to tuck in your shirt, you shouldn't be wearing jeans to that place. There you go.
It's true. And don't wear black and navy blue. That's bad too.
No.
It's just bad. But Justin, you know who that ref was?
The ref? Oh, yeah. But I didn't know which one it was.
Well, it's Earl Hebner, and it was his debut match. It kind of sucks that this match was his debut because honestly, Justin, it felt like it was like the first match of a house show.
It did feel like the first match of a house show. The thing that I thought was funny was this is Earl Hebner's debut for the NWA. And whenever they announced his name as the referee, the crowd still booed. And what's so funny is Earl Hebner just popped up last night on the TNA pay-per-view.
That's wild.
And the TNA pay-per-view was in Montreal where the Montreal screw job happened. So what a wild night.
Freaking bizarre. Okay, so let's talk about why this match was weird. So Mike Davis came in as the champion. However, Mike Davis had never been on TV. Like no one knew who he was. And this title, what was it, like junior heavyweight? It had never
NWA
existed.
Junior Heavyweight, yeah.
Yeah, it had never existed before. And so no one cares about this title. No one knows who this Mike Davis is. But can we just talk about, like, Mike Davis looks like Joey Gladstone from Full House. Cut it out. And then Denny Brown looked like Chachi from Happy Days. And so I was like, is this Nick at Night or what? Like, what is happening? But let's just talk about the ending, because that was really the part that had us very confused. I still don't know who won. Like, obviously, supposedly Denny Brown won the match in 5 minutes and 35 seconds. But when the ending happened, I thought Mike Davis won, and the announcers thought he won and announced him as the winner. And then Denny Brown is walking around with the belt, which was really funky looking, by the way, with the belt above his head. And so then they were like, did Denny Brown won? And what happened, Justin? What happened?
I'm not sure what exactly happened. If that was the planned ending and it was just poorly executed, because I didn't even know who won. It kind of seemed like maybe they were doing one of those things where it looked like one guy's shoulders were down, but the other guy's shoulders were down. It was just all very odd. And then when Tom Miller, the ring announcer, has to announce a correction to his announcement of the winner, I went, okay, but, and then I started getting confused in my head. Which one is Denny Brown and which one's Mike Davis again?
Know, right?
Because like I was just so mind blown. I had no idea what was happening in this match. It was kind of a cluster.
And what you just said is that Mike Davis is never seen on a pay-per-view again. So This was his debut and his last in NWA, I guess.
So long, Mike Davis. Maybe he did more stuff on NWA TV, but as far as our pay-per-views go, that was quite the hello and quite the goodbye.
It was weird. I think that's the first example of why this whole pay-per-view was a cluster. But we go back to Mr. Tony Schiavone backstage, and man, he was such a bright little chipper professional thing. And then this week on AEW Dynamite, Mariah May comes to the ring, and she's standing there taking a little too much time for Tony, because it's zoomed in on her face, and you hear Tony say, "Speak, bitch." And Excalibur, someone's like, whoa, Tony. Whoa.
Oh my God. Well,
I know.
I used to listen to Tony's podcast a long time ago, and the things that would come out of his mouth back then, I was like, dang, this is one dirty old man. He can talk.
Oh yeah. And I know he has a love for Toni Storm and Britt Baker and stuff, so maybe he just doesn't like her. But that was pretty funny. It actually caused quite a bit of controversy on Twitter, but what doesn't these days? Right. I just thought it was really funny. But anyway, Tony says we'll have an interview with Ric Flair shortly, but you see Rick pacing behind him. So, like, why didn't he just do it right then?
Yeah, it looked like it was a convenient time to get it done just right there, but whatever.
Who knows?
That takes us to our next match. It's another singles match with another couple guys who we will never see again on our pay-per-view reviews. So say hello to Brian Adidas and Mr. Ito. Okay, so some longtime hardcore fans, especially if you're a fan of the Dallas territory, the Von Erichs, WCCW, you will be thinking, oh, Brian Adias. Well, that's his name. That's where he's booked everywhere, was Brian Adias. But all the marketing for this match and all the notes that the commentators got and that the ring announcer, Tom Miller, got, who, by the way, has a ginormous stack of papers that he's reading off of, bigger than last week's stack of papers. It looked like he had an entire law case in front of him. But all of that said, Brian Adidas. So thanks to that typo, that's what he was known as through a lot of his NWA career. And he had a very lengthy run in World Class in Dallas. He was a childhood friend of the Von Erichs. And actually, every time that he would have a match in World Class, you could hear the commentators bring that up every time. Well, childhood friend of the Von Erichs is like, yeah, Yeah, we get it. We get it.
it.
Yeah. But then we go to Mr. Ito on the other side of the ring. Not a whole lot of information out there about Mr. Ito. Not really sure if he's still living or not.
What?
It's kind of a weird thing. He was a sumo wrestler before he got into professional wrestling. I found that out after digging a little while. But apparently, from everything I could find, his last wrestling show was sometime in 1984 after this show, like in December of 84, some independent show in Cleveland. So kind of a weird thing. He just kind of vanished and disappeared.
He's like Bigfoot. No one knows if he's alive or dead, or no one knows if he exists. Where is he?
I don't know. He apparently doesn't want to be found. Did you? I don't know. Maybe this is, you were too young for this.
Probably.
But whenever I heard Mr. Ito, all I could think about as somebody who was like growing up largely in the 90s, all I could think about was the O.J. Simpson trial and Judge Ito. And Judge Ito was like one of the most famous people in America for that year or whatever it was. Do you remember that at all?
I really don't. I think I was too young for it. I somewhat remember the Bronco chase. I feel like I was at home, like post preschool, like our grandpa would pick me up and he was watching it on our TV, but that's about all I remember. That's even a blip in my memory.
Yeah. Well, if you look, we talked about last week how there's that big yellow NWA in the ring, and these are just things I noticed because this match wasn't much. So I was just noticing random things like, oh, the NWA is coming unstuck from the ring. That's crappy. One thing that I've noticed too, Gordon Soley, of course, legendary announcer, he makes this sound when he's doing commentary, and something will happen, and he'll go, Have you noticed that?
No, but now that's all I'm gonna notice. When? Like before he speaks?
No, he'll like the good guy will turn something around, or the bad guy will turn the momentum around, and he'll go, got him with a hand right to the face.
Why?
And I remember Jim Ross on his podcast, like doing his impersonations of Gordon Soley, and he'd always finish somewhere in there going, and I was like, I wonder what that's about. Gordon Soley straight up does that, and I don't know what it means, where it comes from. It's as weird as saying supplay instead of suplex.
Oh gosh, every time now, freaking Mark, he looked at me and he turned into Jericho Learning Tree, and he was like, "Hi guys, it's actually supplay, not suplex. Thanks guys." And I was like, "Oh my god, I want to hit you, Learning Tree."
It's funny.
Right.
Did you notice though, they were introing Brian Adias, and the women went nuts for Brian Adias.
Oh yeah,
they were shrieking.
I mean, he's not bad looking. Ricky Steamboat's way better looking, but I'm just saying.
Did you notice that Earl Hebner, they had him reffing 2 matches in a row here. He did the first match and he did this one. And Mr. Ito, I almost called him Judge Ito. Boy, let's not do that. He was standing. Remember last week we talked about how Kabuki had those shoes with the big toes separated. Well, Mr. Ito had those shoes that have like the 2 wooden blocks on the bottom, and they're like, it's like a flip flop with 2 wooden blocks underneath. You know what I'm talking about?
You want to know why? It's because that's a sumo wrestler thing. Because in 3 Ninjas Kick Back, when Tum Tum goes to learn how to be a sumo wrestler, I remember the sumo will like kick it off, kind of Matt Riddle style, like we saw last night. And it was like these wooden platform shoes. And so thank you, 3 Ninjas. Hey-ya! I wish I had a sound key for that. Hey-ya!
Well, anyway, we go through this match. Like I said, this match wasn't much. There was no championship attached or anything. I will say this, though. You know you were watching an 80s match when you see a guy up in the airplane spin and it leads to the finish of the match. He did the airplane spin. Brian Adias did. Slams Mr. Ito down, pins him, and that's the end of that one. Really short match, just over 3 minutes. So a little bit of a time filler there, a little bit of a throw a good-looking guy in front of the women, and we move right on to Gordon and Bob back in their little commentary booth. Now, you remember last year, they were in this backstage area with that crappy backdrop behind them. Mm-hmm. It was really, really bad. Well, now they are in a commentary booth, room, something kind of above the arena with glass behind them. You can see the ring back there. So they are there actually live. At first, it looks like a green screen. But they did a slow-mo replay at the end of this match. They should not have done that because it was showing Brian Diaz's punches, and
Yeah.
they looked terrible
They
in
were like
slow
3
motion.
inches from the face and the head.
Yeah,
It was like,
yeah. So
oh.
that was a quick thing going back to Gordon and Bob, and then we go on to the next match.
Yes, we've got another singles match, and it was Jesse Barr, who is the champion, versus Mike Graham. Now, this match was for the NWA Florida Heavyweight Championship. And was this the one that said like the Florida State something? And I was like, is this college? Like, I'm so confused.
Yeah,
But-
I got the feeling that it was like, because it said on the screen NWA Florida, so I'm like, okay, so that's an NWA territory.
Right.
So this is their main champ, but why are we doing this on an NWA Jim Crockett Promotions show? It was kind of odd, but I'm sure there was some reason.
It was super weird. I hope we don't do that going forward, because then I'm like, where are the other 49 states? Huh? But anyway, so Jesse Barr, he's still alive today. He had his last match in 2016 just at an indie show, and get this, Lumberton, North Carolina. Never heard of that place before, but I'm sure it was lovely. He feuded with Carlos Colon, or as I like to say, Carlos Colon, in Puerto Rico.
We saw him last week against Abdullah the Butcher.
We did. He later went to the WWF, where he wore a Lone Ranger mask, and he was called Jimmy Jack Funk. Now, I had heard of Jimmy Jack Funk, but I hadn't heard of Jesse Barr. So it's interesting. I'm learning that all these people have multiple identities as we do this show, Justin. His father was the promoter Sandy Barr, and his brother was a wrestler named Art Barr.
Yeah. Art Barr
like
was actually a tag team partner of Eddie Guerrero's way back in the day, way back in the early 90s. Yeah.
Oh, dang. So I bet he would know if Eddie is actually Dom's dad. Just saying, starting controversy. Mike Graham, he was born in 1951, but unfortunately passed away at 61 in 2012. So his last match was at an indie show in Miami Beach in 2012. It always amazes me that all these guys born in like the 40s and 50s, their last match wasn't very like long ago. So that's impressive. He had an amazing amateur wrestling career in college. Maybe he went to Florida State, who knows. Later became a trainer and an agent for WCW, which seems like a good fit for him. The Graham family had a tragic episode of The Dark Side of the Ring about them, with a story that rivals that of the Von Erichs. If you haven't seen that episode, go check it out. And again, I'm learning all these things through this podcast that makes me want to go back and watch those episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, because I remember them, but now I have a better face to the name back when they were big. So yeah. As for the match, man, the best thing I know is that Jesse Barr's hair is the perfect helmet. Oh my God. It's like he just like went to a wig store. It was like, give me the perfect helmet, and set it on his head. It was like Uncle Jesse. There's so many Full House references in this episode.
He's got that Lego hair.
Lego. There you go. You would bring that up. Justin loves Legos so much. His house is covered in them.
I just bought a new set this morning, actually. Just saying.
How much was it?
Well, I used my Barnes & Noble discount card. So
What a nerd.
So it was about $120.
See, this guy, okay, he got married like 2 or 3 weeks ago. The next morning, you would think that him and his new bride are just like having brunch or something relaxing. No, they were going to a fancy mall in San Antonio, Texas, trying to find themselves a good wedding gift, a $500 Lego set. Right? Right? You were buying like the Disney castle or something. Anyway, back to
It wasn't that extreme, but yeah.
I remember when I went with you, and like, you're not a big spender most of the time, but when it comes to Legos, you are willing to shell out that cash. What are you doing for that extra cash, Justin? You stripper.
Look, I'm just saying, for the right number of subscribers, I will release my OnlyFans page.
Oh God, I don't want to see that.
Taters Tots.
Oh, I don't like that. Why am I British? So did you notice, Justin, in this match, Jesse and Mike, they played Mercy for about 6 minutes. Now, do you remember that game, Mercy?
Yeah.
It was a game in the 90s where you'd interlock your fingers with a friend and you'd turn them and twist them. And when you just couldn't handle the pain anymore, you'd say Mercy. Now, I swear they played this for like 7 minutes. I was like, come on, get with it.
It went on a while.
It did. I'll get to this later in my final thoughts of the pay-per-view. But anyway, we've got our first pay-per-view referee takeout in this match that we've seen since doing the show, right? But he got right back on his feet and was right back in there. I was shocked. I guess
it was like it didn't even matter. It's like, well, why did you do
what
that?
was the point?
Nothing came out of it at all.
Yeah, like he went out and I was like, oh man, we're gonna get a pin that doesn't get counted. But nope, he was right back on his feet. So I mean, I kind of liked it, it's watching these old pay-per-views, it's like they're unpredictable because I'm so used to like the 2024 way of wrestling. But Jesse Barr did win and retain his championship in 11 minutes and 46 seconds. Good for him. But yeah, that match, it was just kind of draggy, I mean, especially with the 7-minute Mercy match. I don't know. Yeah, like 7 minutes of those 11 were just them, holding hands. But anyway,
and nobody said mercy.
No one. I mean, if they did, we couldn't hear it. But the sound, the mics back then didn't pick up a whole lot. We go kind of backstage. We go off the segment. And we get a replay of NWA TV where Dick Slater is tied up and Ricky Steamboat is being beaten down by the Long Riders. Steamboat is injured and has to put up $10,000 for tonight's match. And guys, that was a lot of money back then. $10,000. That's like a trip to the grocery store today. But back then, that was a lot of money.
Yeah. And we'll find out later on that Tully Blanchard, who he's facing tonight, is also putting up $10,000 for tonight's championship match. So big stakes on the line. But let's go to a match that has 0 stakes on the line.
Unfortunately.
So many on this show. It's Assassin number 1, who we saw last week, and Buzz Tyler versus the Zambui Express. Now, Assassin number 1, we saw him last week in a tag team match. His partner was Assassin number 2. Buzz Tyler, we've never seen him before. And he actually was born back in the 40s, like we were talking about, finished his career sometime around 1985, the year after this, in Kansas. Earlier in this year, before this show, he was actually feuding with Wahoo McDaniel. And the year after this, 1985, he left the company, but he refused to return the NWA Mid-Atlantic heavyweight belt, saying that Dusty Rhodes owed him money. Ooh. So the company just had to create a brand new belt and said, oh, we lost that one.
Why is he putting it on Dusty? Like, why is he putting that on Dusty, not the company? Like, why is it Dusty's fault?
I guess because Dusty was the booker at the time and just was deciding payoffs, maybe.
That's weird.
Yeah. So on the other side of the ring, we have the Zambui Express, made up of Elijah Akeem, who both of these guys had very early deaths. It's quite sad. Elijah Akeem died at the age of 37, just a few years after this show. He was better known, though, as Bad Leroy Brown. That's a name that he went under forever before this show. And he actually used that song as his entrance music, which is so much fun. A couple years before this, he actually had a pretty good feud with Ric Flair. So he's not a nobody. He definitely had a career. This team, Zambui Express, in other territories had actually previously been known as the Muslim Connection, which, takes on a different meaning today, I think.
A little bit.
But it's interesting how times change. We'll just put it that way. His tag team partner, Kareem Muhammad, he also died young at the age of 42. He was better known as Ray Candy. He had a long career as Ray Candy. In fact, he at one point worked in New Japan as Super Mario Man when the whole Nintendo craze was first taking over. And he actually had a hand in training WWE Hall of Famer Kane. Can you believe that?
Really? I feel like they are in two totally separate eras of life and time, but I guess that makes sense.
So we talked about how the first match was such a cluster and made no sense, and we didn't know what was happening. It happens here again. And I was very confused, not as confused as the first match, but something got miscommunicated because the ring announcer, Tom Miller, states very clearly while doing his introductions that this is an elimination tag team match. He even says when one man gets pinned, he has to go to the back. Okay. Remember that. Do you remember hearing that?
I remember hearing that, Justin.
Okay, we keep that in mind as we keep talking about this match. Big cheers for Assassin number 1 and Buzz Tyler. And these guys on the Zambui Express, they are massive.
They are giant. When you said they both died at a young age, it seemed to be, I think I talked about it last week or something. Like that seemed to be the way. Like the bigger they were, they kind of died young. Kind of sad. But Justin, I was so excited when I read this card because I thought you pronounced it zombie. So I thought it was the Zombie Express. And that was like a few years after George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which came out in 1978. Wait, this isn't Boo You Horror. Never mind. But I was so excited because I was like, we're going to have some zombies or something. Then it came out and it was like the Zambui Express. I didn't know what that was.
That's a pretty good ring announcer voice. Early 80s ring announcer voice. Pretty good. It's pretty good. So funny you say that because I tried looking for a definition of the word Zambui. I thought maybe it was some region of some other faraway land.
Oh, I know. That's the thing that cleans the ice in a hockey game.
Jeez.
Waboom!
The Zambui, yes, you're right. Stone Cold drove one into the arena years later. Yes.
Okay, I'll quit interrupting. Go for it.
No, it's literally, if you search for the word Zambui, it only comes up in the context of wrestling. This was not a word outside of wrestling, which means that it's probably a word that Dusty Rhodes made up. We'll call you. We can't call you the Muslim Connection, baby. We'll call you the Zambui Express. What you think about that, huh? I like it, baby. Yeah.
I still just hear Jay Briscoe. Not Jay Briscoe, Mark Briscoe. My bad.
Zambui. It's also the sound of somebody farting on a metal folding chair. Zambui.
Zambui. I like that.
So here's my question. And again, I have so many questions about this match. But if there's no longer an Assassin number 2, and there hasn't been for a while, how long do we have to wait until Assassin number 1 is just the Assassin?
Well, it's because you're never going to see him in a pay-per-view again, so we're never going to see it.
There is true. Yeah, of course. But it's almost like the company had to post an internal job listing for Assassin number 2 before they could release it. And then nobody was deemed acceptable for the assassin position by HR.
Yeah.
That's the story in my head.
I agree fully.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So let's get to it. Here's why this was so confusing. Remember what I said in the beginning, that this was an elimination tag team match. You remember that?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So Assassin number 1 pins Kareem Muhammad. So the match should continue 2-on-1.
Yes.
But right after the pin, we go back to Bob and Gordon, who look very surprised to be on camera. They look like they just got caught in the middle of taking a dump. They look like, huh? And then they start vamping. And in the background behind them in the arena, you can see the ring announcer get into the ring and a new ref getting into the ring. So somewhere along the line, it was not communicated to somebody that either this was an elimination tag team match or that this wasn't an elimination tag team match. Very weird. This weird ending comes in just under 5 minutes. What is happening, Michelle?
I don't know, Justin. I think this was another one of those, oh crap, Vince took our people. Let's scramble and figure something out. And there was just no communication there, which to me, I'm like, it's your biggest event of the year. How are you not communicating this? And so that makes me wonder, like, how late, like how soon, how close to the pay-per-view? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, how close to the pay-per-view all of these changes happen? Because that's a major mistake. That is a major mistake. And it's live TV. I mean, I don't know, Justin. I was just as confused. I was like, why is there a new ref? That was just, I don't know. This pay-per-view, man.
It was a weird one, and the weirdness will continue throughout the night. Let's go to the back now. Tony's with Dusty Rhodes in his dressing room, and Dusty is just kicked back. He's just leaning back. He doesn't have a care in the world, like he's got this in the bag. And he says that after tonight, Ric Flair will be yesterday's news. In classic Dusty styles, he says, I don't want to say anything else except I'm the prettiest man in the universe. You got to love Dusty.
You gotta.
Yeah,
I mean,
those barely tinted sunglasses, I'm sure, made him so much prettier too. Those '80s like kind of yellow sunglasses. Yeah.
I mean, I think Cody is rather pretty, but Justin, when Dusty is talking to the camera and he's just kind of going off about this match, did you notice him wagging his finger at the camera?
He
was just,
did tend to do that a lot. Yeah.
do you know how many times he wagged that finger in that 2-minute segment? Because I went back and I counted, and it was hard to keep count.
You counted his finger wags.
Just take a guess.
No,
How many times?
Wait. I'm the Rassle Stats guy, and I didn't even count the finger wags. So let me guess. In a 2-minute promo, I'll say 13 times.
Oh, Justin, you're so off. You're so off, because I was laughing my butt off at him wagging his finger, his index finger, just like that. So I went back and counted. He, give or take, one or two, because it was hard to keep count. He wagged that finger 134 times in 2 minutes. Can you believe that? Like, if you go back, he's just like wagging it the whole time.
How did it not fall off? My
I
God.
don't know. And like he was wagging it like 3 times per second. And so we got to the point where we were just counting, like every time we got to like, when we got to like the 60s and 70s, we just start over at 1, 2, 3, 4 and kept adding them up, because we couldn't even get 71, 72, 73 out. Like, it was wild. But yeah, 134 times, give or take a few.
Wow. Well, I commend you on that level of research, because I would have just said, wow, he wagged his finger a lot. Well, moving on.
Yes. Well, let's go to the next singles match. It was Black Bart, who's the champion, versus Manny Fernandez for the NWA Mid-Atlantic Brass Knuckles Championship.
Mm-hmm.
Our participants are obviously Black Bart, which I was like, is this Hangman Adam Page? Like, is this where he got his shtick? Because y'all's costumes are the same thing. Costume, wardrobe, gear, whatever. I call it a costume. I'm a theater kid. Sorry. But Black Bart, his last match was in 1999 in McKinney, Texas, which that's basically Dallas, kind of. What?
So, I think last week I mentioned that back 20 something years ago, I worked for a company called XCW in Denton, Texas.
Right.
That is TCW after it's changed its name to XCW. XCW was originally known as TCW, and then under new ownership, they changed it to XCW. So that's why, because when I worked there, it was in Denton, Texas, which is just about 20 or so miles from McKinney.
Interesting. So yeah, he had that last match, 1999 at TCW McKinney Mayhem. He was also known as Man Mountain Harris or Hangman Harris. So I'm like, did Hangman Adam Page draw some inspiration here? Did he? I don't know. He's still alive today. He later became a regular jobber on WWF TV, and he is in the Texas Wrestling Hall of Fame, which I didn't even know that existed, but pretty cool. Wonder if I could get into it. I don't know. Manny Fernandez.
Podcasters? Could we be in the podcaster wing of the Texas Wrestling Hall of Fame?
I mean, we were both born in Texas, so I feel like we automatically get an in. I'm just saying that's how Texas things are, right? So Manny Fernandez, weren't they kind of referring to him as the Raging Bull? Yeah. Okay. Did that kind of fall off later on? Because I've heard of Manny Fernandez, but they were just calling him the Raging Bull. So was that like a very temporary
it started being kind of almost like Bret the Hitman Hart, Manny Raging Bull Fernandez, that sort of thing.
Got it. Okay, cool. Well, he's still alive and kicking today, and he actually just had his last match in 2022 at an indie show in Orlando. So that's really fun. He was born in El Paso. See, that's why he's in the Texas Hall of Fame. Born in Texas, and he played football for West Texas A&M. That's up in Canyon, Texas, which is weird because it's more in North Texas, but whatever. But he bounced all over the indies, especially in Texas, because, the Brass Knuckles Championship was for matches where both wrestlers would wear brass knuckles. That type of championship was retired in 1986 because it was probably a really bad idea and not a good example for children. Not that any of this is a good example for children, but but at this time, Manny Fernandez actually held the tag team championship with Dusty Rhodes. So that's pretty cool. For the match, I know I just look at like outfits and stuff all the time, but the ref was dressed like a mechanic with a big old belt buckle. You notice that? And then he had these Pee Wee Herman shoes. And I just thought he was going to start being like tequila. Da, 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 da. And then, or now I will play the proper sound cue. It reminded me of the shoes that Cousin Eddie gave Clark in Vegas Vacation.
You serious, Clark?
There you go. There's the sound cue. I screwed that up. I screwed up the intro, the opening. I'm all over the place today, Justin. But,
my God. Was this the rep that was wearing all blue?
Yes, it was the jumpsuit, the mechanic jumpsuit with the belt.
He looked like Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka. I was about to see him turn into a blueberry and watch that big ass belt just pop off.
I was about to say that belt looked a little tight, and so it was like a boink. That's funny. I did like the. Okay, so let me just say, Manny Fernandez did win in about 7 minutes 35 seconds, but I liked how it was set up, Justin, because it was like some trickery that he was playing, and it showed him sitting on the ground, like thinking it through and then executing and going for it. And then he won the match. So I thought that was kind of cool. That's something we don't really see often, where like they have that light bulb idea and then they're like, oh, I'm going to go do it. But what do you think of the match?
No, it was fun for what it was. It was like a lot of these matches, fairly short, just around 7.5 minutes. And Manny Fernandez, there's a reason why he had so much longevity in this business. And when we say that his last match it was in 2022, that's that we know of. I mean, it's very possible that he could be doing more indie dates as we speak. But he's had this long career because even though he was never like a huge national name, he was very good in the ring. He had great psychology, and he's helped countless young wrestlers learn the trade and learn how to be better. And that showed in this match where he was one of those young wrestlers, and it showed through. It's a lot of fun to watch this one. I did wonder, with this being for the Brass Knuckles Championship, I saw no brass knuckles.
I didn't
either.
Both
guys did have their fists taped up, so maybe in theory the brass knuckles were under there, or maybe brass knuckles champ at this point means no DQ. I don't know what it meant, but kind of a weird one. Again, something weird on this show.
I know they probably just forgot the brass knuckles. They it got added last minute. And they just forgot because that's apparently the what's been happening on this pay-per-view. So
yeah, actually, I just got word the brass knuckles signed with Vince McMahon and the WWF. That's why they couldn't show it. So
got it. Ugh, of course, that Vince. Well, back to Gordon and Bob, who says that was a hard fart match.
Yes, hard fart match. What?
I'm going to start saying that. Gordon says that there will be a 7-minute intermission. Such a random, but I was like, oh God, we got an intermission again. But once again, and that's why I was confused, because I'm like, okay, are we like, is it going to go off air and skip the 7 minutes and we're going to get back into it? But oh no, they're going to show the ending of last year's cage match again, which we've already seen. We saw it at the beginning of the show. We've seen it, brosivs. Tony's backstage with Ricky Steamboat, and Ricky says he has severe injuries to his lower back and his lower floating ribs, which I'm like, you have ribs that float? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I was not aware of that term.
I know.
Yeah.
He says that he has pain, but Tully Blanchard might be listening, so he doesn't want Tully to know. And, saying it on a pay-per-view is probably the wrong move. But come on. Okay, so then we go back to Bob and Gordon, right? And they inform us that Tully Blanchard has also put up $10,000 for the match, and that there's no disqualification, no running away. So, yeah, was this the 7-minute intermission? Like, everybody, including Ricky Steamboat, seems to be like really like stretching for time. Did you feel that?
Yeah. Like it felt like while Ricky was talking, I'm like, I mean, Ricky's great and everything. Love Ricky Steamboat. But it got to a point where it's like, is he waiting for his pizza order to get here? Is he just lonely? Like, why is this going on so long? And then once it got back to Bob and Gordon, it became clear we're trying to cover this long 7-minute intermission.
I don't know why I guess that was another thing that wasn't planned well, because
if you think about it too, like now there's a lot of times, especially on WWE pay-per-views, at least 7 minutes between matches, but it's covered up with packages and promos and interviews and stuff that are like very seamless, and it seems like these were supposed to be this amount of time. We were aware of this. Whereas back then, it kind of felt like they were flying by the seat of their pants, really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know I went and put my stuff from the washer into the dryer during this intermission. Tony interviews Tully Blanchard with JJ Dillon. And honestly, I couldn't even pay attention because Tully's unibrow was looking at me. I missed everything that was said. It was just looking at me. I was like, someone wax that. Yeah.
It was thick. It was thick. He might have had small animals living in that unibrow. It was he rivaled Santino Marella on that one.
It's true. My husband Mark would have the worst unibrow if I didn't tame that thing every week. I mean, it's bad.
Every
it's apparently
week?
Oh my God, yes. And I'm like, how do your brows grow so much in like a week? He's like a freaking golden retriever. He's covered with blonde hair everywhere. It's weird. So don't know what happened with Tully and Tony because I was just too distracted. We go back to Bob and Gordon again, Justin. It doesn't really matter what they say here. When you watch this pay-per-view, just note though that there's a guy sitting outside the commentary booth who he keeps just kind of leaning his head between Bob and Gordon. And there's a couple different guys that do this throughout the show. And most of them are kind of like, oh crap, I'm on camera. I gotta hide.
For anybody who's watching on YouTube, pretend that Bob is here and Gordon is here. Here's what it looks like, okay?
It's true. He looks so confused. Yep, that's what he did. But I appreciated it because most in now times people would be acting goofy, just making faces at the camera, but he just looked more confused than anyone. All of those guys. There was a woman at one point, she kind of just peeked into the camera real quick and peaced out. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if he was unaware that they were on the air. I don't know, but I want to know what happened to that guy. Where is he at today? Can we interview him? I don't know.
Yeah, does he know that he was caught in this moment and it's on NBC Peacock forever?
Surely he has to know. But Justin, take me into another one. This seemed like an AEW match because it was a weird gimmick match, but I liked it. Tell me about it.
Yeah, we have a loser leaves town tuxedo street fight.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Featuring two guys, one of whom we saw on Starrcade 83 last week under a mask. Back then he was Charlie Brown, but now he is luscious Jimmy Valiant once again against Paul Jones, who Paul Jones by this point, he was more of a manager. In fact, he had a whole stable called Paul Jones Army. Had a lot of guys in there like Manny Fernandez, Abdullah the Butcher over the years. People swapped in and out. But Paul Jones, by this point, like I said, was a manager. He had this feud going on with Jimmy Valiant. And so a couple years after this, because this feud didn't end here, they would actually have a hair versus hair match, which Paul Jones lost. And so he got his hair shaved off. But tonight we have a tuxedo street fight. Loser leaves town. So if you can imagine, both of these gentlemen enter the ring wearing tuxedos. They both have that silly dubbed-in music that is all over Peacock and the WWE Network because of the rights issues we talked about.
It kills me.
It is so bad and so fitting. There's a couple later on in the show that are really bad. Paul Jones comes out there. He's with one of the Zambui guys. Valiant is with Assassin number 1 because Assassin number 2 hasn't been found yet. And even Tom Miller, the ring announcer, he doesn't know which Zambui guy it is. So he says, with one of the members of the Zambui Express. He doesn't even know. And I will say this now. You talked about a match you had never seen before. I remember there being a tuxedo match on Monday Night Raw in the early days of Raw, like 94, 95.
Really?
Between Howard Finkel, the ring announcer, and Harvey Whippleman, the manager. And it was just as disturbing as you can probably imagine it to be right now.
They had a full-on match?
Well, the only stipulation in theirs was you had to get the other guy's tuxedo off of him.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a dirty movie or something.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go down that vein, Jimmy Valiant in this match had hidden a rope somewhere in his tuxedo when the match started. He wrapped it around Paul Jones' neck and then tied it to the top rope of the ring. And then he just starts beating down Paul Jones. He even takes the flower out of Paul Jones's tuxedo, his lapel, and shoves it in Paul Jones' mouth. And then he starts ripping at this tuxedo. And he's ripping it. He rips the shirt off, the jacket off. And Bob Cottle's like, well, we may have to cut away if this goes much further here. But they didn't. So he's ripping at the tuxedo. He finally gets to the point where Paul Jones is standing there in his underwear. And just envision this. He's in his underwear. He's tied to the top rope by his neck. It was like a very weird 50 Shades of Grey by this point. I thought I had sat on the remote or something. But somehow Paul Jones slips out of the rope, and after a ref bump and some interference, Paul Jones somehow gets the win. And now Jimmy Valiant, he's got to leave town. He's got to become Charlie Brown from out of town all over again. Weird match, crazy match, more for laughs, more for fun. What did you think?
I liked it. My favorite part was when he got tied to the rope, just because I feel like I've seen that done in a more modern fashion recently. I can't put my finger on what match it was, but it was a fun match. I like gimmick matches, as I've said many times in my life. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. One of the guys, I don't remember who, like they take off their jacket and then they're wearing one of those tuxedo t-shirts. It's not even like an actual tux like button up. So I thought that was fun. And then I'm just excited to have Charlie Brown back, man, because then we get the Peanuts song again. So I liked it. It wasn't my favorite match of the night, but I felt like it was a little more cohesive than a lot of the matches we saw. So that's good.
Which is weird because it's like the comedy match. But anyway, we go back to Tony. He's backstage with Ric Flair. Flair, if you notice this, if you look at his interviews in the dressing room last year compared to this year, he seems to have
Sorry, guys, that was thunder.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of thunder.
I know, that was loud. It scared me.
Whoa. But if we get cut off YouTube, listen to the podcast version.
Exactly.
But Rick has a whole lot more confidence in his interviews at this point. I mean, he seems like the champion at this point, which is kind of fun. You're starting to see the Ric Flair we all know and love. Did you notice that?
I did. I also noticed his forehead was looking real beat. Did you notice that? He had like some scars, like some deep ones up there. Yeah.
Yeah, he had been in some bloody ones over the past year, it seems. He says tonight that Dusty better be half the man he's told people he is, which is a pretty good line.
Great.
We go back to Bob and Gordon, and again, we hit one of these points where you can tell something went off track because they say, and we have another match coming. And we'll get to that in a couple of seconds. And it was like, oh, somebody just gave them the cue that it's not ready yet. So they have to keep vamping again. It just all seems so haphazard. But finally, we get to the next match, which is for the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship.
Yes, it was between Dick Slater and Ron Bass, who was the champion. Now, Dick Slater, we last saw him on NWA Starrcade 1983, so last week's episode. But Mr. Ron Bass, is this not Black Bart? He's wearing the exact same thing and he looks the same. Like, is this not Black Bart? I was like, why is this guy got a second match?
When I was looking at the rundown of matches, I kept thinking, wait, which one is this? Is this Ron Bass's? But yeah, it's easy to get him confused.
It is. And so I was like, Hangman, Black Bart, who are you? But anyway, so he debuted in 1971. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 68 in 2017. And his last match was just 4 years before his death at the Wrestling Legends Tour in Germany. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of different. He frequently teamed with Black Bart. So I guess they were like, no, I'm taking the tag team outfit. No, I'm taking it. No. And so they just, but they were known as the Long Riders. And later he had several mid-card feuds in the WWF before winding down his career as more of like an enhancement talent. So yeah, he never became a superstar or anything, but that's okay. I liked how, so what was is he the manager, the Dylan guy? I kept calling him the Dylan guy. So I like how Dick Slater, he gently shoves the ref away and then he gets DQ'd, yet this Dylan guy could get in the ring and do whatever the hell he wants. And so I was thinking, money is such a thing in this pay-per-view. Like, was it a thing that wrestlers in kayfabe would pay off refs back then or something? Because these refs are so inconsistent. And I don't know. Was that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was in a storyline or two here and there, but ideally, JJ would have done it when nobody would have seen it, but the timing of it at times seemed off. Now, that's nothing against JJ either, because we've talked about people's Mount Rushmore of managers. A lot of people have J.J. Dillon on theirs, and we'll see him later on in the 90s. He'll actually be the on-screen authority figure for WCW. But at this time, he was just a manager. And like to what you were saying, sometimes it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I did like him. He gave me kind of Don Callis vibes in the slimy level. So I liked that. Ron Bass did win the match by DQ and retained his championship in about 9 minutes. Now, he only won because, that Dick Slater, he was like, go away, ref, and got DQ'd for that. So whatever. I'm against that ending.
It wasn't very consistent in logic at all.
No, but Justin, guess where we're going now? We're going back to Bob and Gordon. Can you believe it?
Oh my God. I have not seen these guys in about 10 minutes.
Exactly. And I'm not gonna lie. I mean, they're fine, but every time it goes to their bored faces, I'm like, oh God, again. Oh God. And I think they felt the same way. But anyway, they mentioned that there's a next match and there are other things to come. There you go.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you. This is the weird part of the show where if you look at the timestamp, it is exactly halfway through the show. We get a close-up of the American flag, which was very shaky. It looked like my mom was holding her Sony camcorder and shaking and showing the American flag. And then a trumpet version of the national anthem happens. And I'm like, yo, I'm patriotic. I like America, but why halfway through the show?
It was crazy. And you would think that if they're going to do this, like they would at least fade to like some shots of the crowd, like looking at the flag, hand over their heart, whatever. It's just a 2-minute shot of the American flag there in the arena with this trumpet playing the national anthem.
It was
very odd.
Extremely random. Now, you just said something that made me think. I was very sad that they did away with the audience interviews for this pay-per-view, because last week those were fun. I liked seeing, the style of people back then, and like they were so goofy. And like every time you and I go to a wrestling show, like that's pretty much the same kind of fans that attend now, and maybe it's just because we live in the South.
I have an intruder.
I was about to say your door just opened by itself, bro.
My dog just knocked the door open and is now under my desk. So
it's because it's thundering.
What's that?
Funny. It's because it's thundering. Yeah, my dogs, I locked them in their bedroom because I didn't want them intrude. That was crazy because you can't see the dog, and so your door just open. That was freaky.
There she goes.
Justin.
She's going to hide in the bathroom.
Oh, good.
Yes. So now it's kind of paid off because our next match features the Russians, Ivan Koloff and Nikita Koloff, against Keith Larson and Ole Anderson. So big, longtime fans of the NWA and WCW, early WCW, you'll know Ole Anderson for a lot of different things. But the Koloffs, Ivan, he was not Russian. He was born in Canada. Oh. And actually, before he had the Russian gimmick, he had an Irish gimmick. So, early 80s wrestling, if you want to get heat on somebody, just say they're Russian, and that was good enough.
I got something to say about that in a bit.
But in the 70s, he actually had a 3-week run as the WWF champion when he defeated Bruno Sammartino. It was only for 3 weeks, and then the belt went right off of him. And later on, Ivan Koloff, he actually became an ordained minister, if you can believe that. What? On the other side there, Nikita Koloff, his debut match, from what I could find, was earlier this same year, 1984. So on this pay-per-view, he is relatively brand new to being a full-time professional wrestler. His last match was actually at a WCW house show in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So funny how so many of these guys, the last time that we can find that they were in the ring is either on an independent show or on a house show. Not many say, okay, that's a pay-per-view and that's how I want to go out. It must be a hard thing for them.
Like Sting and Revolution. I mean, that was like one of the best pay-per-views I've ever seen. But maybe it's just because they didn't have the longevity of the career. Maybe. I mean, because Sting was active in the ring at like 64 years old.
Well, and it's interesting.
Every week.
It's interesting you bring that up because during Sting's last match, you can actually see Nikita Koloff in the crowd. He's sitting there with Scotty Riggs and Magnum TA. So you
That's
can
so
see
cool.
him there. He was there that night. So it's kind of funny you bring that up.
That is weird.
Keith Larson on the other team, not a whole lot out there about him. He was briefly known as Rocky Kernodle and booked as the brother of Don Kernodle. They actually were not related that I know of. Don Kernodle is in their corner for this match. And then we get to Ole Anderson, who we just lost earlier this year at the age of 81. He would later, I mean, yes, he was known as being a wrestler, and he was known as being one of the original Four Horsemen when that stable comes around. A lot of people talk about him, though, in terms of when he was the booker of WCW. He made a lot of decisions people liked. He made a lot of decisions people didn't like, especially the wrestlers themselves. A lot of them had a very rough relationship with Ole Anderson. He was he was the kayfabe brother of Arn Anderson, and Arn Anderson was brought in basically because he looked just like Ole Anderson.
I was gonna ask you, like, how did that happen? Like, was it the chicken or the egg first? Like,
Right. Yeah.
did he
No,
come in and
that's
then they're
one of the
like,
reasons
"Oh."
he got hired was because they look so much alike. We go into this match and it very much has a us versus them mentality. It makes sense why they did the anthem, before this spot.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'm like, man, I think I told you last night at the indie show, I was like, what was up with the obsession with Russia? Like in the 80s. I mean, obviously I didn't exist in the 80s. And Mark told me, he was like, no, it was like a big thing. Like, it was just a big deal. Like each decade kind of had their thing. And, the Ole and what's his name? Keith Larson, they had the USSR thing going on, right?
Mm.
And I don't know what the USSR stands for. I don't know what it is, but all I can think about is Ray Stevens. Remember Ray Stevens, Justin? He was like, I think he was Christian comedian. I don't know, but he did like funny songs. He did The Streak. I know that's probably his most famous thing. Oh yes, they call it The Streak. Well, I remember he had a video that was surfing USSR. And it was like all the movie stars, like,
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing I know about the USSR is Ray Stevens.
Yeah, it was basically Russia plus some countries, and then when it was broken up, all these new countries were formed.
Oh, so it wasn't Ole and Keith. It was the other ones that were the USSR.
Yeah.
Okay, because I thought it was like the United States, US.
No.
And so, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, because I was making notes looking back. But yeah, man, I just want to talk about Ray Stevens because we're talking about the 80s and 90s, and he's a vibe, man.
Well, did you notice Ivan Koloff, when they came out there, he had a Russian flag in this hand and an American flag in this hand, and he kept getting heat from the crowd by putting the Russian flag higher than the U.S. one. And boo, people ate this stuff up, this whole rivalry, maybe just because it was the U.S. versus Russia or versus the Soviet Union, but they were eating this up. One thing I did notice, Ric Flair's always been known to wear his knee pads below his knees, covering his shins and his calves. And he always said in his words, it was because he had minuscule calves. But Ole Anderson is doing the same thing. And I can't think that his legs were that small because he was a heftier guy. Wasn't sure if anybody else would notice this, but
Yeah, well, Minuscule Calves was the name of my first high school band.
Really, I remember going to y'all's gigs. Didn't last long. Crowds is nuts for this. I mean, if you listen to the crowd, as hot as they are at the beginning of this match, they are the same way all the way through, even in submission holds and that sort of thing. They're just hot for this match. And
Yeah,
of course,
were.
Ole, he was always known as such a grumpy guy. Even though he's getting all this love from the crowd, he doesn't even crack a smile. Like he's just out there doing his job. At some point during this match, something got bleeped out. Did you hear that?
I did, and I was wondering what they said.
Honestly, it was the early 80s. He probably said but, and that was enough.
Probably.
I can remember one time in like the 90s WWF, Bret Hart said something like, well, I'm going to whip his butt. And Vince McMahon on commentary is like, oh, wow, he's really upset now. Like, he said,
and now
but.
we've got Tony saying, speak, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. There was, and I don't want to throw accusations out there, but commentary is talking about Nikita Koloff's muscles and how built he is. And about that time, we zoom into a bleeding zit on his back. And I'm not saying that there are things that cause back acne. I'm not saying that Nikita was doing those things, but it's just interesting.
He was massive. Like he came out and I was like, that is meat.
Yeah, another thing I noticed, whenever somebody's submission hold, you don't see as much today, but the ref will raise their arm and see if it drops. And then do it again, see if it drops. Tommy Young, the referee, did that in this match, and he was raising him quick. He was like, bring it up, down, bring it up, down, bring it up, and then it stayed up. Never seen a referee do it that fast before.
I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, but finally there's a brawl on the outside. Don Kernodle, who's on crutches, he gets knocked down, and during the chaos, Ivan gets the pin in the ring. This, I think, was the longest match on the show at just over 15 minutes.
And the Russians won, Justin. But,
Yep.
I didn't know they won because this is just rather consistent. And it's not just with this cluster pay-per-view. It happened last week, too. I guess just in the 80s, endings to matches were not near as clear as they are now because, I'm typing my notes in my phone and I will look down for 10 seconds and I look up and the ring is empty. I have no idea what happened. So I have to go back 20 seconds to see the finish. And sometimes like in the first match, I still don't know what happened, even though I watched it. But, now in wrestling, there's a build up to the match and then when the end is coming and you're waiting for it and you hear the audience say 1, 2, 3. And then there's a big fanfare around it and we know what happened. It was just kind of like, oh, you won? Okay, run away, bye.
Yeah, well, and I think the lack of music plays into that as well. It's not the bell rings and you hear somebody's music. Right now, you're barely hearing the bell ring and then the guys just get out of there. You're right. And the matches can come out of nowhere. The endings can come out of nowhere. Like we talked about before, it's not like you're waiting for somebody to hit their big signature move. It could come off of a side suplex.
A suplex, Justin. Thanks, guys.
I'm sorry. Suplex. Anyway, we go back to Bob and Gordon speaking. And here, this actually, I made this note because it goes into what you just said about not knowing when things were officially done. Because they ask if Tom Miller, the ring announcer, made an official announcement of the winner, and they say, well, we can go back to him if needed. And at that point, it kind of felt like they were saying that in a way of, hey, let's go back to them because we aren't ready yet. We don't know what we're doing. We need to kill time. Did you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's funny because I forgot that even happened. So I think it's funny I brought up the ending of the match being confusing for me because I didn't even realize. I think I realized it at the time. I just didn't remember now. But yeah, and again, it was one of those communication things of, we should probably announce the winner. Hey.
Yeah. But fortunately, we don't stay backstage too long because we go on to the next match, which is another championship match.
Yes, it was for the NWA Television Championship. And honestly, this was my favorite match of the night, of the card, Justin.
All right.
It was Ricky Steamboat versus Tully Blanchard, who was the champion at the time. Obviously, we saw Ricky Steamboat on the pay-per-view last week. But Tully, he's still around, man. I mean, he's not even that old. He's only 70 years old. And his last match was on AEW Dynamite in 2021 in Jacksonville. Now, he was kind of prominent in the early days of AEW. He actually managed FTR, who I think is their biggest tag team at AEW minus the Young Bucks. So I had totally forgotten that he managed them. But I remember there was a really fun interaction between him and Sting. Sting was, beating someone up and then Tully comes in and hits Sting on the back with a chair. And Sting is completely unfazed and turns around and looks at him. And I mean, he's towering over Tully. And then Tully got, I think it was like Sean Spears or someone. It wasn't someone from FTR to hold down Sting while he got a towel and wiped off his face paint. Oh, the nerve. The
evil.
Nerve. I know. But Tully and his unibrow was an original member of the Four Horsemen. And he has a daughter named Tessa Blanchard that kind of made a name for herself as a wrestler. I think she got a little bit canceled. I don't know much about what happened. I just see when anyone brings up her name, there is anger on Twitter. I have no idea what that's about.
On Twitter, on Reddit, on MySpace, on smoke signals. Yes.
Exactly. Now, I didn't realize until watching this pay-per-view that Tully is from San Antonio, which makes me like him a little bit better because, you know, I'm a big fat San Antonio fan. It's my favorite city in Texas. I tell everyone, if you're under the age of 25, go to Austin. If you're above 25, go to San Antonio.
Ooh,
So
that's a good guideline there, actually. I've never heard that. That's good.
it really is because I mean, you hit 25 and you're like, oh God, I'm too old for Austin. Oh God, there's too many college
I
kids.
lived in Austin for a year in my 30s and I was too old for Austin.
Exactly. I felt like this was the best match of the night. I felt the crowd was the loudest for this one. What I didn't like is, okay, so Tully Blanchard pulled out the win. He retained his championship in about 13 minutes. But what I didn't like is, okay, Tully is on his knees over Ricky Steamboat, and the ref is down on the ground watching them. He is like 3 feet from Tully's crotch. And Tully reaches into his little undies and pulls out whatever it is that he was going to hit Ricky in the face with. And the ref did nothing. He is 3 feet from those undies. And so he should be able to see this. He is looking. So that was the one little, tiff I had with this match. Did you like it? Did you like the match as much as I did?
Yeah, no, this match was great. Is what it needed to be. And there was some really great psychology in this match, kind of like we were talking about in one of the matches earlier, where Ricky Steamboat, he had been injured, right? And he had talked about his back and on his left side. And the commentators even pointed this out, that throughout the match, Ricky was trying to keep his left side away from Tully. So whenever he was facing him in the ring, he kind of had his right side turned toward him. It's really, really smart stuff in this one. And if you'll notice, before that part you were talking about with the knuckles in the ring, Ricky was trying to bring Tully back into the ring with a suplex. And mid-suplex, Tully pulls out those brass knuckles and hits Ricky in the face. We're going to see that again in a couple of weeks when we do the Wrestling Classic for WWF. Remember that spot because we are going to see it seamlessly here very soon.
Fantastic. Yeah. I thought this match was great. I like the blood because I'm gross like that. I had another thought, but I already forgot what it was. It was something about you saying that the brass knuckles come back. Maybe I lost it, Justin. I'm sorry, I lost it. But anyway, after this match, Justin, we go back to Bob and Gordon, but I'm tired of it. We didn't even see them for long. We saw their faces, and then we go to the next match. I don't even know what the point of it was.
So we got another title match here, NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. The champion, Wahoo McDaniel, versus Superstar Billy Graham. Now, Superstar Billy Graham, we just lost him last year, a little over a year ago at the age of 79. But he is really credited with a lot of stuff in the wrestling business. A lot of people say that he is the person who came up with the modern wrestling interview, the way to be interviewed as a wrestler, because he just had this huge personality about him. Before this, even, he had been WWF champion. And so he had this amazing career already heading into this. But people like Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura, they all claim that they took some part of their look or their work or their speech from Superstar Billy Graham. And Wahoo McDaniel, who he's facing here tonight, we saw him last week on Starrcade 1983. So this is an interesting one. Billy Graham, he had this era after a little while where he became kind of this kung fu guy. And so you can see that in this one. He's kind of wearing the headband. He's doing some kung fu moves in the ring. Kind of a strange clash from what he used to be. But Wahoo, poor Wahoo, he comes out there in his full headdress and everything, and he's got the same dubbed-in music that Tully Blanchard had in the last match. And this music does not fit Wahoo McDaniel
didn't.
whatsoever. It's like this. You know what this music reminds me of? It's like if you were at like this Christian music festival and they showed a video of how they built a skate park in the inner city and there was some background music for that video montage, that would be this entrance music that they used for Wahoo McDaniel.
Well, Justin,
it's so bad.
Ray Stevens was totally headlining that Christian concert that we're watching this
God.
video. Waboom, that's a callback.
Isn't our friend Nashley somehow related to Ray Stevens.
Yeah, I think it's her uncle or her great uncle.
Yeah.
But he was at their family reunion, and I mean, I would have been a little. I'm like, I want to go to your family reunion. I would have been a little starstruck to meet the guy behind the streak, Guitar Zan, and
Maybe you
everything
could
is
just go streaking
beautiful.
through the reunion. Who knows? Who knows? Did you notice how freaking big Billy Graham was here?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
he is massive, and he later really regretted all the things he did to his body back then with steroids and various other things, and it contributed largely to his declining health over the years. But Wahoo, he actually previously held this championship before this match, but was stripped of the title. He then won a tournament to regain this championship, and sometime since the last Starrcade, he's turned heel, which kind of explains why he's going against Billy Graham here. At one point, Billy Graham pulled Wahoo's hair, and all I could think is he probably came back with a handful of hair dye, like his hand is black. Because there's no way, like we talked about last week, that Wahoo's hair was naturally that black at that age. There's no way.
But Justin, did you know, because I always look this up, that Wahoo McDaniel during this match was 46?
He looks 60.
I know. And it looks like he should naturally have like gray hair. Like he's like 3 years older than you and Mark. That is so weird to me. Like, why do we look younger now? Is it because we know that the sun and cigarettes are bad for us now? Like
maybe, yeah. I don't know. God, that's insane. I did not know that. Wow. Because I really thought he had to be in his 50s by this point.
I did too.
Wow. Well, Wahoo gets the win, kind of like we were talking about earlier, how it can come out of nowhere with a tomahawk chop. Now,
got you again.
No. Oh, we didn't.
If you wouldn't have stuttered on that, I probably wouldn't have said that, but it just kind of came out. So sorry.
Tomahawk to a chop.
That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, go on.
But Wahoo was known for this chop, but it led to the finish of the match out of nowhere in just over 4 minutes. This match was nothing. I mean, here and gone. So he retains his championship, still the champion. We go, guess where we're going? Back to Bob and Gordon.
No way.
Have you ever noticed this? Whenever they go back to Bob and Gordon, Gordon always has this look on his face while Bob is talking, like, okay, are you going to let me talk now? He looks very annoyed with Bob Caudle the entire time. Hey, is that just me?
I feel like that's how you look at me because I talk a lot. But I got it. Yeah.
But now they say there's going to be a 10-minute intermission. Good God almighty. So they show the ending of last year's cage match again for the third time now. And they mentioned that Flair's been the NWA championship since that night, which, as we mentioned last week, that isn't technically true. He did have a 2-day loss to Harley Race that was never recognized by the NWA. And then he did lose the championship to Kerry Von Erich at the Von Erich tribute event for about 3 weeks or so. But other than those, he's been the NWA champion for the year. Tony's in the dressing room with tonight's judges for the main event. So if the match tonight goes the entire 60-minute time limit, these three guys are going to decide the winner. We have Joe Frazier, who is a boxing legend. He's the referee for this match, in the ring referee. And he's wearing a shirt that looks like a boxing robe tucked in. It even has the Everlast logo. Very, very odd thing. We have Duke Kiyomuka, who had a long wrestling career in Japan and in the U.S. And, of course, to be a judge for a wrestling match, we have Kyle Petty, the NASCAR driver. Now,
why?
I understand this was a Southern audience. And Southern audiences of wrestling probably are Southern audiences of NASCAR. That Venn diagram is probably a circle.
Venn diagram.
Okay. But this guy is the most stereotypical looking NASCAR driver ever. He's got the mullet. He's got the crappy mustache taken after Tom Selleck in the 80s. Yep. It was wow. And so we go back to Bob and Gordon briefly, just as our friend, the Curious Hillbilly, just decides to pop his head in between them again. If you missed it the first time, YouTube viewers, it looked about like this.
It it. Like, you're not even exaggerating.
Yeah, no, it was so distracting and so bad. And I don't even know that Bob and Gordon saw him in their monitor. If they did, they completely ignored it because this guy was so intrusive. But anyway, that leads us now to the main event, and that is all yours, Michelle.
Yes, the main event, Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair. Now, last week, before I was going to talk about the main event, I kind of paused and I was like, oh, I'm talking about this. And it's because I had a story in my head, Justin. Now, probably my earliest wrestling memory was we went to a WCW house show at Midland College. I was probably about 5 or 6, I would guess. And Ric Flair was there. And I remember someone grabbed his trunks and pulled it down and exposed his very white butt. And I remember I thought that was the funniest thing I have ever seen in my life. I was like, oh my God, they showed his booty, because I'm like 5 or 6. And I will never forget that as my first wrestling memory. And then last week on the podcast, it distracted me and then I forgot to talk about it. So there you go, everyone. Ric Flair's butt is my first wrestling memory.
Well, there needs to be a Twitter account called Ric Flair's Butt so that we can just tag him on Twitter whenever we post things about this show.
Exactly. Well, anyway, this was for the NWA World Heavy Championship and $1 million. What? That's a lot of money now. So that was a lot of money back then. This is our first time seeing Dusty Rhodes actually wrestle. Now, he was born on October 12th of 1945 and unfortunately passed away June 11th of 2015 at the age of 69. Now, I think we all remember when Dusty died, and we're losing a lot of our great wrestlers from back then, but that one hurt, man. Like, that one hurt. He did so much for the business, and he gave us Cody and Dustin, so that's fantastic. He debuted in 1967, and he had his last match in 2007. It was at the WWE Great American Bash in San Jose, California. So he at least got a little bit bigger of a send-off than some of these other guys. Obviously, modern fans, you should know that he is the father of Dustin Rhodes in AEW and WWE's Cody Rhodes. I definitely think Cody dyes his hair to match Dusty's. And I have a theory, y'all. I have a theory that Cody fakes the lisp to be more like Dusty. I just have a theory because sometimes it is way more prominent than others. Because there was a time where I was like, oh, did he go through like speech therapy? Because he didn't have a lisp during that promo. And then it was back the next week. So I don't know. It's just my theory that it's like a gimmick or something.
Well, that's kind of like how Dusty did all of his promos in that voice that everybody knows and everybody tries to imitate, but that he didn't really talk like that. But it's hard to catch any video of him not talking like that.
Right. So I don't know, y'all. It's just theory. But like Ric Flair and Ole Anderson, he later became the booker of WCW, and he spent his later years training up-and-coming wrestlers in the WWE Performance Center. Just a giver, man. Great guy. Ric Flair, obviously, we saw him last week, so not a lot to talk about there. The winner of this match does win the title and the $1 million check. So a lot on the line. And the referee for this match was the boxing legend, Joe Frazier. Now that's going to come in to play here in the ending. But I liked how, man, these entrances, they both got one. That was great. And it was like we saw one little piece of pyro and it was a blip. And it's like they held on to that little blip of pyro the entire show. I don't remember if they used it on Dusty or Ric Flair, but it was just like a pew. And it really just kind of looks like the blip they use for Orange Cassidy when he comes out in AEW, because it's just a little like that's what it was. But Dusty, they dubbed in, I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but they dubbed in this weird baby making music for Dusty. Did you catch that?
That was strange. I felt like I was watching like a Cinemax softcore movie from the 90s.
Yes.
And like literally, if you had this as a track and just layered in like the sounds of some people moaning and grunting, your parents would come running in the room to wonder what you were doing.
Absolutely. It was horrible. And then Ric Flair kind of sticks with the theme because he comes out and he's got this coat on, but it looks like what like a lonely housewife would like open the door when the pizza guy shows up. It's like pink with like fur trim. I was like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? But the match was great. It was pretty short, but I did notice, Justin, This is the very first time we have heard the woo on a pay-per-view because we didn't hear it
We didn't
last
hear it
week.
last week.
We didn't. He even kind of did his little signature walk, but it was a little different than the way we know it. So but Justin, Ric Flair won. He retained his championship in only 12 minutes. Now that's kind of weird for a main event, right? Well, it's because Dusty in kayfabe busted his eye, like his face, on a turnbuckle, and he starts bleeding. And Joe Frazier, the boxing ref, kind of stops it, kind of looks at it, lets him go a little bit longer, and then he calls a stoppage for Dusty's injury, saying he doesn't want him to lose his eye, lose his eyesight. And of course, Dusty's pissed, and I get it. And honestly, I was a little bit pissed. I've been waiting for this. I've been going through this cluster pay-per-view, waiting for this match, and then that's what happened. What were your thoughts? What were your thoughts on that?
When it first happened, I went, oh man, what a lame ending. But the more I thought about it, the crowd was just happy that Ric Flair won. So there's that. And the way that it was explained, as we'll get to in a second, really kind of makes it make sense. Because when you first think about it, you're thinking, why is Joe Frazier, a boxing guy, the referee for this match?
Right.
When you look at this ending and they talk about the fact that it was ended because in boxing, a split over the eye is much more damaging than in wrestling, then it kind of starts to make sense. And I felt like this kind of gave Dusty a very valid excuse to be pissed off that he lost this match.
Yeah, I get that. I guess I'm just living in a 2024 world where like Jon Moxley can literally be bleeding out and no one's going to stop it. Or even like in boxing and UFC, they're, covered in blood and no one stops it. I guess we've just gotten way more violent or like accustomed to it. I don't know.
Which is weird because we know more about concussions now and we try to avoid them at all costs. And there's not as much blood in wrestling now as there was back then. Mm-hmm. But I can't think of another time that I've seen a wrestling match kayfabe stopped due to blood loss.
Yeah, so that does make sense about the boxing ref. Speaking of how we're more aware of concussions and stuff, that freaking slap fight show, that is brutal to watch. I can't even watch it. Like, okay, I understand it's really stupid to just slap people, but it is so freaking dangerous. And I understand UFC is dangerous and stuff, but you are just unguarded, whack. You see these guys fall over and seize. Oh, I hate it.
You see them forget math. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I don't think a lot of them knew math in the beginning.
Probably.
But but anyway. So yeah, Ric Flair, he retained. He's got his $1 million. So we go back to Bob and Gordon because obviously this is in the 80s. So we don't end the pay-per-view there. We still got a whole lot of backstage to go. We're back to Bob and Gordon, who say that cut over the eye means more in boxing than wrestling. So that kind of goes into the kayfabe explanation of it. Like, oh, dang, it meant a lot more to Joe Frazier than it does us. But Tony's with Ric Flair in the dressing room. Rick has the belt and the check for $1 million. He says it's unfortunate the way things happen, but he's thankful and he will be back next year. Now, of course he's thankful. And I mean, I don't think he thought it was unfortunate at all. He's a millionaire.
What do you think he spent, knowing Ric Flair, what do you think he spent that $1 million on, and how long did it last?
You don't want me to say on this podcast.
Okay.
Let me go with a different. Honestly, he probably used it on spray tanning, but wore undies the whole time because I remember that tan line on that white butt of his. So.
You know what? And that was a spot that Flair loved doing. He did it so many times. But
Showing
I think
his butt?
when we saw it, yeah. but I think when we saw it at that WCW house show, that would have been about 95. And I believe he was going against Randy Savage in that match.
I think you're right. Right. Yeah. So yeah. I don't know. What do you think he spent the $1 million on?
Well, I have much the same line of thinking as you do. So I will just say that he spent it on gifts for his daughter, Charlotte Flair.
Well, she didn't exist yet. She was born in 86.
He saved it.
Got it. Perfect.
Actually, we know Flair. He did not save them.
I was actually looked up when Charlotte was born. I was surprised it was 86 because that's our sister's age. Yeah, we have another sibling. Did y'all know that? She's right between Justin and myself. But anyway, we're back to Bob and Gordon. I mean, at this point, a completely different guy walks behind the glass behind Bob and Gordon. But man, he is not subtle. He is happy. He's the third commentator, man. He's just happy to be there. He's smiling for about 5 seconds and then kind of pieces out. But man, I think they finally just had to like cut away to a wide shot of the arena.
They cut away to that wide shot of the arena. So like, okay, this guy's not gonna move. This guy's gonna keep doing this. It was really, really funny.
At least he waited till the end of the night. He didn't, because we did see him earlier in the night, this particular guy. But anyway, Tony goes to Dusty Rhodes, and for me, Justin, this was the highlight of the night. Absolute highlight of the night.
This is one of those promos why people speak so highly of Dusty Rhodes. My God, was this good.
He was pissed. And now he wasn't wagging his finger as much this time. No. He said he has never had a match stopped. He says, this is wrestling, not boxing, Frazier. These are men. You better be in fighting shape of your life because sometime, somewhere, I'm coming to get you. He's threatening Joe Frazier. He's not even as mad at Ric Flair as he is Joe Frazier. This was so great. And then he goes to Rick and he's like, and Flair, if you call that a victory, you better go home and kiss your mama, which I don't really know what that meant. I was like, that's funny. I don't really understand what that means. Do you know what that means?
I guess because he's gonna die. I don't know.
Okay.
I love the line. It was delivered so well that I was just like, I love all this. This is great.
It made me laugh. I just didn't know what it meant. But he tells Rick to spend the money well and then kicks Tony out of the dressing room, which I wouldn't want anyone in there either when I'm mad. Back to Bob and Gordon, who sent us home, and we cut to a closing montage. Which does have one of the crappy themes from earlier, but it was kind of cool. I mean, it was, I don't know. It was like an ending credits and kind of showed pictures of everyone. It was kind of neat. Honestly, I would probably tune away if I was watching it live, but after the montage, we have one more interview. Tony's with Joe Frazier, who defends his actions and explains why he did what he did. I don't know, but it kind of awkwardly ended the show and should have just closed it with a montage. That Joe Frazier interview was not necessary.
There was like no reason to put that Joe Frazier interview after all of that. It was really weird.
Yeah, it was really weird. But Justin, tell us what happens after the pay-per-view.
So after this pay-per-view, moving forward, Brian Adias, he would return to World Class in Dallas. Buzz Tyler, he'd win the NWA Mid-Atlantic title from Dick Slater in March. But like we talked about, he'd leave the company, taking the belt with him. Assassin number 1, he left the company after this event. He left Jim Crockett Promotions to join CWG. Zambui Express, they broke up in 1985. The following year, both members went to different companies. Paul Jones and Jimmy Valiant, that feud just kept on going and going and going. The Russians, they would regain the NWA Tag Team Championship before Nikita would begin a feud with Ric Flair over the NWA World Championship. Quite a feud those two had. Tully Blanchard, he would actually feud with an up-and-coming Magnum TA, who we're going to see over the years, over the United States Championship. Cool. Ricky Steamboat, not long after this event, Starrcade 84, he would leave the company to go join the WWF, like so many had before him and so many will continue to do. Dusty Rhodes, he'd go on to become the NWA Television Champion, and Ric Flair would remain the NWA Heavyweight Champion throughout 1985 and into 1986.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, excellent. Well, Justin, what are your final thoughts on this pay-per-view? Yeah, same.
I enjoyed Starrcade 83 more, I think, and they had a lot to live up to with this one, and I understand that. And they're under weird circumstances where their talent's getting rated and things are having to change at last minute. That said, it seemed quite disorganized and a lot of mistakes happened that shouldn't have happened. And doing a live wrestling show was not new necessarily, but there's a lot of elements in doing any live TV show. But I felt like they were better handled the year before than they were this year. What about you?
Absolutely. I don't know if the first one was just like, oh my gosh, this is like kind of the first pay-per-view ever. This one just felt like get dragged, honestly. I was just really waiting. Like the Ricky Steamboat Tully Blanchard match kind of rejuvenated me. But a lot of the matches I feel could have been left off, especially because they obviously weren't communicated well. But what's crazy is back then, I guess it didn't matter as much, because I think about things now, like if this pay-per-view happened today, it would be ripped to shreds and they would never have another show again. Like
Yeah.
our standard is so much more like mean and critical now. But it was fine. I'm looking forward to seeing the next Starrcade show. I think I'm just gonna blame Vince. This was Vince's fault. He screwed it up. There you go. That's a good way. So tell us about Rassle Stats. Where can they find you?
Well, Rassle Stats, you can find on Twitter at Rassle Stats. And when you go there, you will see that 30 minutes before every wrestling show for WWE, TNA, AEW, and Ring of Honor, I post the year-to-date stats for that company. And then every Monday, you get year-to-date stats for the entire company throughout since the beginning of this year. So go to Rassle Stats on Twitter, and you can check that out. As far as this show goes, I will be posting the updated NWA pay-per-view Rassle Stats on our Rassle Recap Twitter account. So far, the leader with 2 wins is Ric Flair. So I'll give you that much, and you can find out the rest on our Twitter account.
Excellent. Cool. Well, you can find me at Michelle Tater on Twitter, because I'm clever like that. Or you can find me on TikTok at the Michelle Tate. I haven't made a whole lot of videos lately, but maybe I'll get back to it. I have some fun ones stored up that you can go watch. But Justin, guess what? Next week, we're talking the very first WWF WrestleMania.
Oh, that's going to be a good one.
I got chills.
If you are a newer fan and you've only seen what WrestleMania looks like now, wait until next week. As we've said on Twitter, you can either watch the pay-per-view before our show, or you can listen to our show first so that you have some extra info going into watching the pay-per-view. You will not recognize WrestleMania as it's known today when you watch WrestleMania 1. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
I cannot wait. So everyone, join us next week as we talk about WrestleMania 1 on Rassle Recap.
Bye.